Most men believe seduction is a sequence of correct actions done at the right moment. A better line, a bolder attitude, extra effort. The more they adjust external pieces, the more something feels wrong. Interest doesn't sustain. Attraction doesn't deepen. Desire doesn't arise. This happens because female desire does not respond to isolated actions. It responds to the mental state a man sustains while acting. David Buss explains this through evolutionary psychology, showing attraction forms from consistent signals, not single performances. Women were not shaped to react to explicit attempts at seduction, but to stable cues of value, direction, and dominance. These signals are read subconsciously, long before words or techniques are evaluated. The female body evaluates who governs his internal state, who occupies space naturally, who responds to the environment instead of being ruled by it. This assessment happens automatically without conscious thought. What matters is not what you do once, but what you consistently represent. Attraction is not triggered by moments. It is formed by patterns that repeat without effort. That is why canned lines fail. That is why appearance alone does not sustain desire. That is why direct effort often produces the opposite effect instead of attraction. The female brain is not aroused by trying. It is aroused by reading posture, reading rhythm, reading emotional stability beneath behavior. When a man tries to seduce, he places himself in pursuit. When he sustains the right internal state, he is interpreted as a choice rather than a seeker. The hidden trick was never a specific move or technique. It is a continuous behavioral state, an alignment between mind, body, and attitude that remains even when nothing is happening. Few men activate this state because it requires self-mastery, social awareness, and emotional control. It does not require boldness in moments. It requires consistency over time. Internal consistency is rare. Most men leak need through tone, movement, or timing without realizing it. The body always reveals the truth first. Throughout this video, you will understand the mechanism that makes the female brain reinterpret you, not as pleasant, not as acceptable, but as sexually relevant. This mechanism does not depend on impressing or convincing. It depends on sustaining the correct state long enough for instinct to take over. When that happens, desire does not need to be provoked. It emerges naturally as a response to what you have come to represent. Seduction stops being something you do and becomes something you are read as before you ever speak. Technique 1. Psychological positioning. Choice, not pursuit. There is a brutal difference between the man who enters an environment wanting acceptance and the man who enters observing whether it is worth staying. This difference is not verbal. It is felt instantly. Before words form, the nervous system already reads intent, confidence, and hierarchy. Robert Greene explains that whoever appears to choose activates attraction by occupying a higher psychological position. This is not arrogance, it is the absence of need. The female brain recognizes this absence of need in less than a second. It registers it as value, stability, and direction. When a man positions himself as a candidate, everything about him communicates pursuit. The body leans in, the rhythm accelerates. Words try to convince. The man who positions himself as a filter maintains his axis. He does not change energy upon entry. He observes, measures, and decides. This silent posture immediately shifts instinctive perception. You are no longer evaluated as someone seeking approval, but as someone assessing value. Princeton studies show judgments of dominance and worth occur in fractions of a second, long before any meaningful verbal exchange begins. That means the decision starts before the conversation exists. Speech follows positioning, not the other way around. This technique does not depend on clever dialogue. It depends on how you occupy social space without rushing or shrinking, entering without haste, maintaining open posture, and looking without asking permission. Communicate calm authority. When you ask selective questions instead of presenting yourself, you signal discernment. Discernment communicates value. Value awakens curiosity, and curiosity is the first psychological step toward desire. Most men overlook one critical detail. ending interactions when you decide, not when the topic runs out. This breaks the pattern of neediness. The female brain reads this as control of rhythm, and control of rhythm is interpreted as leadership. Leadership is unconsciously associated with protection and direction. These are ancient biological triggers that operate below conscious preference. Because of this, the effect of positioning as the chooser is silent but powerful. You stop being read as someone seeking acceptance. Instead, you are interpreted as a source of value. Not because you said something impressive, but because you didn't need to. When a man occupies the position of choice, the environment subtly reorganizes around him without effort. And when the environment reorganizes, desire finds space to emerge without being called or chased. Technique 2. Cognitive tension, curiosity, and ambiguity. Desire does not grow when everything is clear. It grows when something remains open. Carl Jung explained that psychic energy moves toward what is unresolved, toward what demands interpretation and imagination. The female brain is not aroused by receiving everything explained. It is aroused when it must decipher and imagine. The common mistake is confusing clarity with attraction. Showing interest too early creates comfort, not desire. When everything is explained, the nervous system relaxes. Excessive relaxation shuts down erotic tension. Desire requires cognitive tension, a subtle curiosity that keeps the mind active after the interaction ends. Research in personality psychology shows controlled ambiguity increases dopamine activation in the brain. Dopamine does not respond to predictability. It responds to contrast, uncertainty, and what is not fully resolved. When answers are too complete, the attraction circuit closes before it strengthens. Desire never has time to build when certainty arrives too soon. This technique has nothing to do with games or manipulation. It requires precision and restraint, not confusion. Incomplete but confident answers create space. Firm presence without invasion maintains tension. You do not hide. You do not withdraw emotionally. You simply do not give everything at once. Attention is given fully, then briefly removed. Not to punish, but to keep the psychological field alive. This shift changes the dynamic. The interaction continues internally, long after it ends. She begins replaying moments, interpreting silences, and filling gaps on her own. The more the mind works, the more the body follows. Desire is built in the space you leave open. Attraction is not about saying less. It is about saying enough to awaken, not to satisfy. The practical application requires calm, not confirming interest too early, not verbalizing intention before the right moment. Presence is sustained without demanding immediate closure or reassurance. When cognitive tension is mastered, flirting becomes psychological rather than explicit. And the psychological always runs deeper than the obvious or performative. This is where most men fail, because they do not understand the mechanism behind desire. That is why a structured code exists, not as mysterious phrases, but as a system for sustaining real tension. A system based on evolutionary psychology, behavioral reading, and social dynamics. This knowledge is rarely taught openly because it requires emotional responsibility and internal control, not surface-level tricks. Those who learn to sustain the unresolved no longer need to force interest or seek validation. They become interpreted as stimulus rather than effort. Technique 3. Visible emotional mastery. This is the most powerful trigger of all. In every interaction, there is a moment when the environment tries to pull you off center. A sideways comment, a subtle provocation, an unexpected silence. This is where attraction is decided, not by what is said, but by who maintains control of their internal state under pressure. Nietzsche described the magnetic man as one who governs himself before attempting to govern anything around him. Desire is born from this internal sovereignty that does not need to be announced. The female body reads emotional control as capacity for leadership and protection. This reading is biological, not moral or cultural. Studies from major universities show self-control is associated with perceived high status. When emotions do not hijack your behavior, you communicate dominance without aggression. You signal that the environment does not command you, that stimuli do not disorganize your internal rhythm. This signal is registered quickly and deeply before conscious reasoning has time to intervene. The most common mistake is trying to fix the mood when tension appears. The man feels discomfort and rushes to relieve it with explanations, jokes, or tone shifts. These behaviors communicate anxiety, not confidence. Anxiety signals loss of internal control, and loss of control collapses attraction. Visible emotional mastery is not coldness or detachment. It is stability under pressure while remaining present. You feel the tension and still maintain your rhythm. In practice, this means not reacting immediately to emotional stimuli, maintaining a steady tone when uncertainty appears, allowing silence without rushing to fill it, sustaining the atmosphere instead of escaping it. When you do this, something changes on the other side. The expected reaction does not arrive, and the test loses strength. Instinctive perception recalibrates in your favor. The reading adjusts. You are no longer evaluated as reactive, but as grounded and self-governing. This is one of the strongest sexual triggers because it signals deep maturity. Not performative confidence, but confidence built from self-observation in difficult moments. The man who sustains emotional mastery creates a field of instinctive safety. Where instinctive safety exists, desire is permitted to emerge. Few men master this because it requires internal training, not momentary courage. It demands inner silence rather than fast responses. But when this mastery appears naturally, the effect is immediate. You stop being merely interesting, you become solid. And solidity at the instinctive level is a foundation of attraction. Conclusion: the hidden trick is not seduction, it is sustaining the right internal state over time. After observing these patterns honestly, one truth becomes unavoidable. Female desire is not born from attempts, but from interpretation. The female brain does not respond to isolated moves, but to continuous coherence. Coherence between psychological positioning, sustained tension, and emotional mastery. David Buss explains that attraction is an adaptive response to consistent signals of value, not to punctual performances or isolated displays. When these signals align, desire appears without being summoned or chased. That is why techniques only work when they stop looking like techniques. Positioning as the chooser is not a trick. It is identity in action. Cognitive tension is not forced mystery. It is calm confidence that does not rush closure. Visible emotional mastery is not coldness. It is maturity under pressure. When these three layers become natural behavior, seduction stops being effort. The man stops trying to seduce. He starts being read as seductive. Notice how everything converges into a single pattern. The man who chooses sets the rhythm. The man who sustains the unresolved keeps curiosity alive. The man who governs his emotions creates instinctive safety. Together, these forces reshape perception at a subconscious level. The female brain reinterprets you not as socially pleasant, but as sexually relevant. This shift happens without effort, explanation, or persuasion. Men who master this do not chase validation or rush processes. They do not try to fix the atmosphere. They remain whole while the environment adjusts around them. And when the environment adjusts, desire finds space to grow on its own. This is the difference between forcing interest and awakening attraction. That difference defines who is chosen without asking. This is the exact mechanism the code of seduction teaches, not through lines or shortcuts, but through internal control and clarity. A complete training in desire psychology, behavioral reading, and social dynamics. For men who want silent advantage and consistency in interaction, some will keep trying to seduce with actions. Others will sustain the right state and let instinct do the rest. That difference decides everything.